Max had never imagined that the war would lead him here. He had fought for Earth, but now, captured by the alien invaders, he was a prisoner in their hands. He was dragged into a cold, dimly lit chamber aboard their massive warship. His arms were bound tightly, and his face was bruised from the battles, but his eyes remained sharp and defiant. He was a soldier, and soldiers didn't break easily. The chamber was silent, except for the faint hum of the ship's engines. Max was alone, but he could feel the presence of the alien guards outside the room, their footsteps echoing as they patrolled. He had been brought here for one reason: to answer questions about Earth, its military strength, its defenses. But Max knew they wouldn't get anything from him easily. The door to the chamber opened with a hiss, and in stepped the alien queen. She was taller than any human, with a regal presence that commanded attention. Her skin shimmered with a faint glow, and her eyes gleamed with the intelligence of 1,000 years. Her name was Lizara, and she ruled over an empire that had conquered countless worlds. Yet, despite her power, there was something in her eyes that Max couldn't quite read. "You are the human," Queen Lizara said, her voice calm but full of authority. "The one who has fought against us so fiercely." Max didn't flinch. He had fought alongside other soldiers, but facing a queen of an alien empire was a different kind of battle. His voice, when he spoke, was steady. "You've conquered my people, but you won't break us." Lizara's sharp eyes narrowed slightly, intrigued by his words. "You speak as though your kind is invincible. Tell me, human, why do you fight so desperately? You cannot win this war." Max stared directly into her eyes, his expression unwavering. "We fight because it's what we do. We never stop. And even if we lose, we keep going. That's what makes us dangerous." The queen seemed taken aback by his response. She had expected fear, perhaps desperation, but instead she saw resolve. Human resolve was something she had never understood. She had ruled with force, with control, and yet here was a human who spoke of defiance without hesitation. "I could make you speak, you know," Lizara said, her voice cold, as she took a step closer. "I could break you with my power." Max didn't flinch. Instead, he lifted his chin, meeting her gaze. "Do your worst. It won't change anything." The queen hesitated, studying him more closely. There was something about this human that made her pause. She had seen many captives before, broken and submissive. But this one was different. She had expected him to plead, to beg for mercy. Instead, he was unshaken, standing tall in the face of certain defeat. Lizara turned away, her thoughts a swirl of confusion and curiosity. What was it about this human that made him so unbreakable? She had not expected this kind of resistance. For the first time, the alien queen wondered if she had underestimated her captive. Max sat silently in his cell, the cold metal walls pressing in on him. He had been here for days, his only company the occasional guard that walked past. Each time they looked at him, he could see the curiosity in their eyes. They expected him to break, to beg for mercy. But Max refused to give them the satisfaction. He was a soldier, and soldiers didn't beg. The door to his cell opened once again, and this time, it wasn't a guard who stepped inside. It was Queen Lizara. She entered with the same air of authority that had commanded his attention before, her presence filling the room. Her sharp eyes locked on his, as if trying to read him, to find the crack in his armor. "Human," she began, her voice calm and controlled. "I have been patient with you, but I will not waste more time. Tell me what I want to know, and I will spare your life. Refuse, and you will die here in this cell." Max didn't flinch. He had heard threats before, but none of them scared him. Instead, he looked up at her with a quiet strength. "I'll die before I give you anything," he replied simply. Lizara narrowed her eyes, surprised by his confidence. She had expected him to show fear by now, or perhaps a moment of weakness. But there was nothing. Just a human, sitting before her, unbroken. "You humans are stubborn," Lizara said, her voice laced with both admiration and frustration. You think your spirit can survive everything. But it will not save you here. Max met her gaze, his eyes steady. You're wrong, he said. It's not about surviving. It's about standing up, no matter what. No matter how many times we fall, we get back up. There was a brief pause, as Lizara seemed to process his words. She had heard many things from other prisoners, but this was different. This human spoke not of fear or surrender, but of defiance, of strength in the face of impossible odds. It intrigued her more than she wanted to admit. You do not understand, Lizara said, her voice softer now, as if speaking more to herself than to him. My people conquered entire worlds with nothing but strength. We dominate. It is how we survive. Max tilted his head slightly, a hint of curiosity in his own eyes. Then what? You conquer everything, take what you want. And then what? Does it ever make you feel like you're really alive? Does it ever make you feel anything? Lizara's eyes flashed with a mix of anger and confusion. No one had ever questioned her rule, let alone her way of life. I do what I must to ensure my people's survival. It is not for you to question. Max leaned back in his seat, his voice calm. I'm not questioning you, Lizara. I'm asking you to think. You have power, but you don't have everything. You don't have what makes us human. The queen stared at him for a long moment, a flicker of something. Uncertainty, crossing her features. She had never thought of it that way. She had always believed that strength was the key to everything. But here was this human, this prisoner, speaking of something entirely different. For the first time, Lizara wondered if she had been wrong all along. Queen Lizara stood silently in front of Max, her sharp eyes watching him carefully. He had said something that no one had ever dared to say to her, something that made her question everything she knew about power. She wasn't used to this feeling. Uncertainty. For the first time, she wondered if Max's words held more truth than her own beliefs. The queen had never been one to second-guess herself. She ruled with absolute authority, and her word was law. Yet here she was, facing the human who seemed completely unaffected by her threats and commands. His calm demeanor was starting to break through her hardened exterior. Max sat in his cell, relaxed but alert. He knew Lizara was trying to read him, to understand why he wouldn't bend or break. He wasn't afraid of her, not even a little. The fear that most prisoners showed, fear of death, fear of the unknown, was something he had learned to control. For him, it wasn't about fear. It was about never losing himself, no matter what. Tell me, Lizara began again, her voice softer than before. Why do you resist me so much? You know the war is lost. Your people are nothing compared to the might of my empire. Max didn't hesitate. It's not about winning or losing, he said calmly. It's about not giving up. Not letting someone else decide your fate. We don't surrender, not because we think we can't lose, but because we refuse to stop fighting, no matter what happens. Lizara's eyes widened slightly. His answer was unexpected. She had anticipated defiance, of course, but not this deep belief in something greater than survival itself. It was a foreign concept to her. You speak as if your people can never be defeated, Lizara said, trying to maintain control of the conversation. You act as if it doesn't matter that your world is crumbling. How can you be so sure of yourselves? Max looked directly into her eyes. Because we know that even when everything seems lost, we can rise again. Humans have faced extinction before and survived. We find a way. We don't give up. Lizara was silent for a long moment, staring at him as if trying to find the weakness, the crack in his resolve. But there was none. She could feel something different in him, something that unsettled her. He wasn't like the other prisoners, broken and scared. There was a fire in him, an inner strength that didn't match the fragile human body he occupied. You are different, she whispered, almost to herself. I don't understand you. Max's voice was steady, but his words held a quiet power. Maybe you don't need to understand. Maybe you just need to accept that some things can't be controlled. The queen's mind raced. Max's words were dangerous, not because they were a direct challenge to her, but because they made her question everything she had ever believed. She had always seen strength as the ultimate power. But now, standing in front of this human, she was beginning to see that there was more to power than she had imagined. Max had said something simple, yet profound, and for the first time, Lizara was unsure of herself. As days passed, the tension between Max and Lizara only grew. What had started as a simple interrogation had turned into something much more complicated. Max's defiance, his unbreakable spirit, had unsettled the queen. He had spoken of human strength and survival in a way that made her question everything she knew about her people and her rule. Lizara found herself walking through the hallways of her ship, her mind preoccupied with thoughts of Max. She had tried to ignore him, tried to dismiss his words as foolish human pride, but they stuck with her, echoing in her mind like a song she couldn't shake off. She had ruled her empire with power and control. She had conquered planets, crushed enemies, and built a legacy of fear. But now, standing on the edge of her throne, she began to see the cracks in her own foundation. Power had always been her weapon, but Max had shown her that there was more to life than just domination. The queen entered her chambers, her mind racing. She didn't want to admit it, but she was beginning to admire Max. He had not once begged for mercy or tried to escape. He stood there, in the face of death, unbroken. His words, though simple, carried a weight she couldn't ignore. Max had spoken of humanity's will to survive, and something in her stirred. She had always believed that strength came from destruction, from crushing the weak beneath her heels. But now she wondered if there was another way. Could there be a strength in standing tall, even when everything around you seemed impossible? Why do you keep thinking about him? Lizara whispered to herself as she paced the room. What is it about this human that makes him so different? She shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. It was absurd. Max was just a prisoner, nothing more. Yet every time she thought of him, a small part of her questioned everything she had believed in. The following day, Lizara visited Max's cell again. She stood in front of the bars, looking down at him as he sat on the floor, his posture relaxed, his face calm. He didn't look at her with fear or hatred, but with something she couldn't name, something almost like understanding. I've been thinking about what you said. Lizara finally spoke, her voice quieter than usual. Max raised his eyes to meet hers, a slight but curious expression on his face. And what do you think now? The queen paused for a moment, her lips parting as though she were about to say something. Then she stopped. How could she explain the storm of thoughts and emotions inside her? She had always been the one in control, the one who held power. But Max, he made her feel something else. You speak of survival, she said slowly, as though it is more than just victory. But is it really enough just to survive? Isn't there more to life than just living? Max smiled faintly, his voice low and steady. Maybe it's not about surviving, Lizara. Maybe it's about finding meaning in it. It's not enough to just be alive. You have to live with purpose. Lizara's chest tightened at his words. There it was again, that quiet strength in him that made her question everything. She had always ruled with authority, never giving thought to what her actions meant beyond power and control. But now, looking at Max, she was beginning to see that there was more to life than just winning battles. The queen took a step back, her mind in turmoil. She had never imagined that a human prisoner could make her question her entire existence. But here she was, standing before him, feeling something she had never felt before. Respect. Queen Lizara paced her private chambers, her mind racing with thoughts of the human prisoner, Max. She had never been one to second-guess herself. But lately, his words had been rattling her. Max's calm and unshakable nature had made her question her entire understanding of strength. She had always believed that power was about domination, about crushing your enemies until nothing was left. But now, after their countless conversations, she wasn't so sure. She had asked herself why Max spoke with such conviction. He had no power, no military force to back him up. He was just one human, nothing compared to the might of her empire. Yet, his words had a weight that made her rethink everything she thought she knew about leadership and survival. Power, Lizara whispered, her voice filled with doubt. Is it only about fear, or is there something more? The door to her chambers opened, interrupting her thoughts. One of her trusted advisors entered, bowing respectfully before speaking. Your Majesty, there is a matter to discuss with you regarding the human prisoner. It seems his resistance is not just physical, but mental as well. His influence grows, and the other captives are beginning to look up to him. Lizara's eyes narrowed. She had expected this. Max's spirit, his refusal to bend, had already started affecting those around him. But instead of feeling anger or frustration, she felt something different, curiosity. What was it about him that made others take notice? I see, Lizara said, her voice cool. It seems he is more than just a prisoner. Perhaps it is time to consider a different approach. The advisor hesitated, sensing the shift in her tone. What do you mean, Your Majesty? Lizara turned to face him, her expression hardening. I will make him an offer. Perhaps, if he is as strong as he claims, he can be of use to me. Not as a prisoner, but as an ally. The advisor's eyes widened. An ally? With a human? Surely, Your Majesty, that would be a dangerous game to play. Lizara's eyes glinted with a mix of confidence and something else, something like hope. Perhaps, but I believe it is a risk worth taking. If his resolve is as strong as he says, then he may be exactly what I need. An alliance, not of fear, but of respect. She paused, considering her next words carefully. I will offer him a deal. If he agrees to cooperate with me, I will grant him his freedom. But if he refuses, then he will remain a prisoner, and nothing more. The advisor remained silent for a moment, unsure of what to say. Finally, he spoke. Your Majesty, are you sure this is the right course? What if he refuses? What if this leads to more rebellion among your people? Lizara's expression softened, though the steel in her eyes remained. We are already at a crossroads. I will not rule through fear alone any longer. It's time for something new. If Max can truly offer me what he says, then I will trust him. If not, he remains my prisoner. As the advisor left her chambers, Lizara stood alone, deep in thought. She had made the decision. Now, it was time to see if Max was willing to take the offer. It would be a gamble, but something about the human made her believe that this gamble might just be the turning point she had been searching for. Lizara sat on her throne, her fingers tapping the armrest in thought. Her mind was filled with uncertainty, a feeling she rarely allowed herself to experience. The decision to offer Max freedom had not come easily. It was a gamble, one that could either strengthen her reign or break it completely. For the first time in her life, she was questioning everything she had known about ruling, about power, and about control. She had always believed that strength came from dominance. Her people had conquered worlds by force, bending others to their will. She had ruled through fear, through strength, and through sheer willpower. It had worked, until now. Max, with his quiet confidence and unwavering resolve, had shown her a different side of power, one she hadn't considered before. He had taught her that there was more to leadership than domination. True strength, he had said, lay in the ability to stand tall, even when everything seemed to be falling apart. He had made her realize that perhaps there was another way, a way that didn't involve crushing her enemies. But as much as she wanted to believe that change was possible, Lizara knew that not everyone in her empire would agree. There were those who believed in the old ways, in the need for absolute control. She had built her empire on fear, and now she was about to risk it all by trusting a human. An enemy. She couldn't deny that part of her was afraid of what might happen if she failed, if Max's ideas were wrong. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening. One of her advisors entered, bowing low in respect. Your Majesty, he began, the human prisoner, Max, requests to speak with you. Lizara stood, her expression unreadable. She had expected this. Max had been waiting for the moment when she would finally offer him the chance to cooperate. He had shown no fear in their previous encounters, and she suspected that this was a moment he had been anticipating. "Bring him in," Lizara commanded, her voice steady. Moments later, Max was brought into the room. He walked confidently, his hands still bound but his posture strong and unwavering. He met Lizara's gaze without hesitation, as if he were standing before an equal, not a captor. "You wanted to speak with me?" Lizara asked, her voice calm but edged with curiosity. Max nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "Yes, I've heard your offer. But before I make a decision, I need to know something." Lizara raised an eyebrow. "And what is that?" Max took a deep breath, his voice serious. "Why did you offer me freedom? Why would you trust someone like me, a human who is nothing but an enemy to your empire?" Lizara's gaze softened slightly, though she kept her composure. "I offered you freedom because I believe that there is more to power than domination. I see something in you, something I didn't expect from a prisoner. Your strength isn't in your physical power, but in your mind. Your resolve is something I have never seen before." Max stared at her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "And what will you do if I refuse your offer?" Lizara's eyes darkened slightly, though her voice remained steady. "Then you will remain a prisoner. But understand this, if you refuse, there will be no more chances. I do not extend mercy easily." Max nodded slowly, processing her words. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the inner struggle she was facing. He wasn't sure if she was truly ready to change, but he knew that this was a moment that could define the future of not just him, but of an entire empire. "I will need time to think," Max said, his voice firm. "But I'm not here to bow to anyone. I'm here because I believe there's a better way, a way that doesn't involve fear." Lizara watched him carefully. She could feel the weight of the moment, the decision hanging in the air. What would she do now? Would she truly risk everything for a chance at something new, something unknown? Max paced back and forth in his small cell, his mind racing with possibilities. He had been given an offer by Queen Lizara, an offer he hadn't expected. Freedom, if he agreed to help her. Freedom, if he could somehow believe in her vision of a different path for her empire. At first, Max had been skeptical. He had heard enough promises from enemies to know that words meant little when actions didn't follow. Lizara was the queen of a vast empire built on conquest. Could she truly change, or was this just another trap to manipulate him? But as he thought back on their conversations, Max couldn't deny the small flicker of hope inside him. There was something in Lizara's eyes, something more than just the will to conquer. She was questioning her own beliefs, her own strength. For a moment, Max had seen doubt in her eyes, something that no ruler of an empire like hers would ever show. It was as if she was torn between two worlds, one of domination and one of change. The door to his cell opened, and Lizara walked in, her presence commanding and undeniable. She still wore the regal armor of her people, but today there was something different in the way she held herself. Her usual confidence was still there, but now it was tempered with something else. Perhaps uncertainty. Perhaps hope. Max stopped pacing and turned to face her. "You've come to hear my answer, haven't you?" he said, his voice steady but not without the edge of curiosity. Lizara nodded, her expression serious. "I have come to hear if you are willing to trust me, Max, and if you are willing to help me shape the future of my empire." Max studied her carefully. She had not threatened him, nor had she demanded an answer. She was giving him a choice, something he had never expected from an alien ruler. It was a dangerous game she was playing, but for the first time, Max could see the sincerity in her eyes. "I'm not here to be your puppet," Max said firmly. "But I do believe in what you said. There's a better way than just taking what you want through fear." Lizara's eyes softened, and for the first time since meeting her, Max saw a flicker of something like respect in her gaze. "I am not asking you to be my puppet," she replied, her voice calm but filled with determination. "I am asking you to be my partner. Together, we can reshape what my people have built. We can change the way we rule and the way we interact with others. But it will not be easy, Max. There will be resistance. There will be those who wish to maintain the old ways." Max nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. This was more than just about him. This was about an entire empire, one that had conquered and ruled through fear for centuries. Changing that would be nearly impossible. But he also knew that the first step in any real change was to challenge the status quo. "I'm in," Max said, his voice steady, the decision clear in his mind. "But it's going to take more than just words. If we're going to change things, we need action. We need to show your people that this can work." Lizara stepped closer to him, her eyes unwavering. "I know, and I am willing to fight for it. But I will need your help, Max. Together, we will change the future." Max looked at her, feeling the weight of the moment. This was it. The decision had been made, not by just one person, but by both of them. Together, they would form an unlikely alliance, one that could either bring about a new era or lead to their downfall. "Then let's begin," Max said, his voice filled with resolve. Lizara nodded, her expression hardening with renewed determination. "We will begin by showing the Empire that strength is not in destruction. It is in unity." The days that followed were filled with tension and uncertainty. Max and Lizara had agreed to work together, but the path ahead was not clear. While Lizara's people had always ruled with fear, the idea of peace and cooperation was a foreign concept to most of them. Change, especially on the scale Lizara was considering, would not come easily. Max knew this. He had seen the power struggles that happened even in the smallest of human governments, and Lizara's empire was vast. There were factions within her court that would never accept this new direction. They believed in strength through domination, and they would resist Lizara's ideas at all costs. Lizara sat in her private chambers, looking out at the stars through a large window. She could feel the weight of the decision she had made, and the pressure to follow through. Her empire had been built on conquest, on fear, but now she was about to ask her people to trust her in a way they never had before. And she knew that not everyone would agree. Max entered the room silently, his footsteps soft on the metal floor. He had been waiting outside for a sign, anything to tell him that Lizara was ready for the next step. He saw the way her shoulders were tense, the way she gazed out at the stars with such intensity. She was lost in thought, but he knew this was the moment. "You're thinking about the council, aren't you?" Max asked, his voice calm but firm. Lizara turned to face him, her eyes betraying a flicker of doubt. "Yes," she said, her voice quiet. "The council will never accept my decision. They will fight me, Max. They will resist this change, and they will try to tear it apart before it even begins." Max stepped forward, his gaze steady. "Then we show them why it's worth fighting for." Lizara's eyes met his, and for the first time, she saw something in him. Something that wasn't just about survival, but about hope. "And if they don't listen?" she asked, her voice heavy with the weight of her responsibility. "We make them listen," Max said with conviction. "We prove that your way can work, not just through words, but through action." Lizara stood up straighter, her posture shifting as if she had finally made up her mind. "I will call a meeting with the council tomorrow. I will present my ideas, and I will demand that they choose a new path. If they do not agree, we will face the consequences together." Max nodded. "And we will show them that we are stronger when we stand united." The next day, the council room was filled with murmurs and hushed voices. Lizara sat at the head of the table, her expression calm but firm. The council members, mostly older aliens who had served the Empire for years, looked at her with distrust. They had always believed in strength through force. And now, here she was, talking about peace and cooperation. Lizara began speaking, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "My people, we are at a crossroads. We can continue down the path of destruction, conquering world after world, Or we can choose a different way. A way where we build alliances, where we earn respect instead of demanding it. We can be stronger than we ever were through unity, not division. The room fell silent. The council members exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. They had never heard their queen speak like this before. Max stood beside Lazara, his presence a reminder of what she had been willing to risk. "Your queen speaks the truth," he said, his voice steady. "It's not about giving up strength. It's about finding a strength in something new. Trust is that strength." Lazara's gaze swept over the council, her eyes unwavering. "I am asking for your trust. Together, we can build something that will last, something better than just war and conquest." The tension in the room was palpable. Would they listen? Would they trust her? The council members shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. Lazara's heart pounded in her chest. This was the moment that would decide everything. Max stood quietly, his eyes on the council, waiting for their response. He knew that the next few moments would shape the future of the galaxy. The council room was filled with tension. Queen Lazara stood at the head of the table, her hands resting on the cold stone surface, her gaze fixed on the alien leaders around her. She had just finished speaking, presenting her vision for a new path forward, a path that involved trust, unity, and cooperation instead of domination and conquest. Now the council members were silent, their eyes darting between each other. Some seemed skeptical, others furious. This was not the empire they had fought for. It was not the empire they had built on fear and strength. Max stood beside Lazara, his presence a steady reminder of her decision. He had believed in her, and now he was giving everything to help her. But it was clear that not everyone shared his faith in the Queen's vision. One of the council members, an older alien with sharp features and an air of authority, spoke up. His voice was filled with disdain. "This is madness, Lazara. You would throw away centuries of tradition and power for a weak idea of peace. What makes you think this will work?" Lazara's eyes narrowed, but her voice remained calm. "It will work because it is the only way forward. We cannot continue conquering worlds, ruling through fear. We must evolve." Another council member, a younger alien with fiery red skin, slammed his fist on the table. "And what of our enemies? What of those who seek to destroy us? You want us to show weakness." Max stepped forward, his voice strong and unwavering. "It's not about weakness. It's about strength and something greater. We don't need to crush our enemies to survive. We need to build alliances, to make our enemies see that we are not just conquerors. We are more than that." The room fell silent again, but the atmosphere was heavy with uncertainty. Lazara could feel the weight of every eye on her. She had made her decision, but now she needed her people to believe in it too. She couldn't lead them with words alone. She had to show them that this was the right path, not just for her, but for them all. The older council member spoke again, his tone cold. "If you insist on this foolishness, you risk everything. Our power, our position in the galaxy, all of it is at stake. If we abandon the old ways, we may lose everything." Lazara's gaze hardened. "If we continue down this path, we will lose everything anyway. Fear cannot hold an empire together forever. It only creates enemies and rebels. We need more than that. We need trust, cooperation, and respect. We need something that will last." Max spoke again, his words aimed at the council. "You can choose to fight change, to hold on to power through fear, but it will not work forever. The galaxy is changing. We need to change with it, or we will be left behind." The room was still, the council members lost in thought. Then, the younger council member with fiery red skin stood up, his expression conflicted. I don't know if I can trust this path. But perhaps there is some merit to what you say." Another council member, an older female with silver hair, spoke up. "I agree. We have seen the results of domination, but we have not tried cooperation on this scale. Maybe it is time we consider it. Lazara's heart raced as the first signs of support began to emerge. Slowly, the rest of the council members nodded, their expressions less hostile than before. The decision wasn't final, but it was a start. They weren't rejecting her completely. Max glanced at Lazara, a small smile forming on his face. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was a step in the right direction. Lazara stood taller, her resolve strengthening. This is just the beginning. Together, we will change the future of this empire. We will show the galaxy that we are stronger when we stand united, not divided. The council, though hesitant, was starting to see the possibility of a new future. It was a small victory, but it was one that could change everything. Lazara and Max had taken the first step toward a future built on trust and unity, not fear and conquest. As the meeting ended and the council members filed out of the room, Lazara turned to Max. "We've made it this far, but the real work begins now." Max nodded, his gaze determined. "Together, we can do this. We just have to keep believing in each other." The days that followed were full of action and change. The council, now more open to Lazara's ideas, began taking small steps toward implementing her vision. It wasn't easy. Old habits die hard, and there were still many who resisted. But the atmosphere in the empire had begun to shift. For the first time in centuries, the people were starting to believe that something new, something better, was possible. Lazara and Max worked together, day by day, to build the foundations of this new era. They met with leaders from different sectors of the empire, forging alliances where once there was only conflict. They opened discussions with neighboring planets, offering peace instead of conquest. Slowly, but surely, the empire was beginning to transform. Despite the challenges, Lazara felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. She had always ruled with strength, but now she was learning that true leadership wasn't about domination. It was about connection, trust, and the ability to inspire change. One evening, Lazara and Max stood on the balcony of her palace, looking out over the sprawling city below. The stars were bright in the sky, and the sounds of the city hummed softly in the background. "You've done it," Max said, his voice low but filled with admiration. "You've started something that no one thought possible." Lazara turned to face him, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "We've done it. This empire isn't just mine anymore. It belongs to all of us. To the people, to the planets we now call allies. I didn't do this alone." Max looked out at the horizon, his thoughts on the journey they had taken together. There had been so many moments of doubt, so many times when it seemed like they might fail. But here they were, standing at the beginning of something new. "You've come a long way," he said quietly. "From a queen who ruled through fear to one who leads with respect." Lazara's eyes softened as she gazed out at the city. "It's not just about respect. It's about understanding. About realizing that we can build something greater than ourselves if we work together. It's about creating a future where strength doesn't come from fear, but from unity." Max nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's a future worth fighting for." As the night fell, Lazara felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had been willing to take a risk, to question everything she knew, and it had paid off. The empire was changing, yes, but so was she. She had learned that true strength wasn't just about conquering others. It was about the courage to face herself and her people, to see things in a new light. "We have a long road ahead," Lazara said, her voice steady with determination. "But this is just the beginning. The future we're building, it's worth every step." Max smiled. "Together, we can make it happen." They stood there for a while longer, looking out at the stars. The path ahead was uncertain, and there would undoubtedly be obstacles along the way. But for the first time, both Lazara and Max felt that they weren't walking alone. The empire was no longer just a place of power and fear. It was a place of hope, a hope that together they could create a better future, one built on trust, unity, and the strength of a shared purpose.